Well, friends, it is a sad day, and I'm sure you know why. You have your heads in the news, and it's not sad because I knew Charlie Kirk personally. I didn't know him at all. I never met him, never spoke with him, never even engaged with him on social media. But it's a sad day because he's a brother in Christ. It's a sad day because of his family, who's now left to mourn, and it's a sad day because of what it means for Canada and the United States, for what's really going on in the spiritual realm. And it's sad because of what this will mean going forward and what we anticipate this is going to look like in our countries collectively. So, we're going to talk about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We're going to talk about the response from the legacy media, both in the United States and in Canada. And then we're going to talk about what's really going on. We're going to talk about what's happening in the spiritual realm, what Jesus has to say about this. And we're going to do why it is that you watch our show. We're not going to give you just the facts. We're not going to give you just the details. We're not going to give you just the specifics. But we're going to help to analyze it from a distinctly Christian, biblical perspective to understand what's going on, to be best prepared to love, obey, and serve Christ for as many days as he would give us on this earth. I'm Andrew DeBartolo. That's Matt Hallick. This is Liberty Dispatch.
Hello and welcome back to Liberty Dispatch, friends, where we bring you Canadian conservative news and analysis from an unapologetically Christian perspective. And Andrew, that's the same perspective that our beloved brother in Christ, Charlie Kirk, brought to his debates, and why the news coming out of the United States of America is so shocking and so saddening that a brother in Christ has, for the crime of being a Christian who spoke about every sphere of life from a biblical worldview, he was gunned down on a university campus where we've been led to believe that should be the petri dish, the place, the institution for debate and discussion. And it's really difficult to, dwell on these things. And it's really hard. I'm sure you saw the videos. I've seen the videos. I'm sure most of our audience have seen the horrific videos. And it's really, really hard to wrap your heads around it. But in case you haven't seen the news, we just want to play a quick clip for you about what took place yesterday in Utah.
That's a lot of people, Utah, I'll tell you what. We're going to be here for a couple hours. Get comfortable. Bring the best libs that Utah has to offer.
Gender Americans have been mass shooters over the last 10 years?
Too many.
Okay. Do you know how many mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years?
Counting or not counting gang violence?
Great. Get down.
So it's at that very moment talking about about mass shootings that Charlie was struck in the neck by a single shot from a rifle to his, I guess that would have been his right side. And obviously it shocked everybody there. You could see the social media post that he put out prior to the event that it was well attended. I think there was some 2,000 odd people at UVU, the Utah Valley University, who came for his Prove Me Wrong times, where he goes to college campuses and discusses and debates the most important issues of our day with individuals who are on campus, presumably to learn and debate and wrestle through these issues. So he went to the place where you're supposed to have these types of discussions. It should be noted that much of the reason of my belief, Andrew, is why they held a bunch of these rallies out in the open air is because at most institutions across the United States, he was not welcome in the university to use their properties to actually forward a lot of these discussions. And then it grew so large that it became a matter of logistics and stuff like that. But yesterday's, so it would, as of time of recording, September 10th, Charlie Kirk was shot while addressing the crowd, while talking about gun violence. And despite the best efforts of security and some brave bystanders to help him, to aid him, he did indeed pass because of the gunshot wound to his neck. And our hearts are obviously broken for so many who knew Charlie, who loved him. Obviously, his wife Erica and his two children, his 3-year-old girl, his 1-year-old boy, who he loved very dearly. And though neither of us knew Charlie, obviously we were familiar with his work. We appreciated the perspective that he brought to these debates. And I know people who know Charlie, and certainly from all accounts that I've heard, the guy was the real deal. As driven, as intense, as energetic as he was, it didn't overcome the love that he had for people. And he was a guy who was an autodidact. He really taught himself he graduated with a high school diploma. He had no post-secondary schooling. He just had a level of drive that pushed him forward to start TPUSA when he was only 18. All right. That's crazy. And by all accounts that you hear from so many of his friends and people who knew him, they very much suspected that one day he might be president. and I think like Knowles and Shapiro, they joke that like one day everybody is going to be working for Charlie based off of, his drive. And he really became, from an upstart 18-year-old who, was pretty unpolished in everything that he did, he became potentially the most effective political activist in the United States of America, potentially the world, and was one of the most influential politicians, maybe aside from Donald Trump, in the United States of America. It's truly astonishing, and our hearts go out to all his loved ones and his friends and everybody who knew him, all the TPUSA crew, and everybody who was impacted, and that includes a lot of kids. A lot of young people really, really were impacted by Charlie Kirk and his ministry and the work that he did. So hearts go out to him.
For anyone who maybe isn't up to speed on all the details, maybe you've not been scouring social media the last couple days, kind of as of time of recording, what we know is that, the bullet was fired from 200 yards at 600 feet away, high-powered rifle. I think it was a 30-06. One shot. The gun was left at the scene. It was only one round that was fired. It wasn't even like it was a bolt action, and the bolt wasn't pulled back, so the empty round was still in the chamber. And then the bullets, the actual casings of the bullets, according to reports, had some sort of pro-LGBT, pro-Antifa messaging or
which
wording on them.
Which was news broken by Stephen Crowder from a leaked internal memo at
and then
the
Megyn
ATF.
Kelly picked up on it. Yeah, so then everyone else picked up on it.
Yeah.
And apparently, the shot was fired. This person jumped down off the roof and fled into the neighborhood. Still at large. Still no one has been arrested or detained. There were a few people that were detained for questioning, and then they let them go.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to make too much of the trans Antifa thing on the bullet, in part because personally I think that's just a little smoke and mirrors. I don't actually think that whoever pulled the trigger was some devout pro-trans, pro-Antifa person. I think that smells to me to be a little bit of let's get people
herring, would
thinking.
you say, Andrew?
Let's get people thinking it is something that it isn't, and that initial old man whose pants were around his ankle that they arrested seems clearly to be some sort of decoy to help the actual shooter get away. So there's obviously it's impossible to with any certainty know the motives of the shooter and know who
I mean, we don't have that information.
We don't know.
We just don't have that information.
This looks like a highly skilled professional kind of job. It doesn't look like some wacko climbing on top of a shed with an AR firing a couple shots. This looks like something a little more precise. But obviously, as more details come out, we'll update as it's appropriate. Whether it's on social media or our show. So what we wanted to talk about today is are two things. One, we wanted to address I don't even know what adjective to use. Just despicable, pathetic response from the legacy media, who seemingly either don't care at all about what happens, or they do, but they're forced to swallow it down because they have a job to keep and they're cowards. But either way, it's despicable. So we wanted to look at that response and comment on it. But really what we wanted to do is we wanted to ask the question, regardless of the motives of the shooter or the specifics, answer the question why, because there is actually an answer to the question why this happened and why is this happening? Why are things like this happening? There's an answer to the question, and we want to explore that answer because there's something to be said about North America and what we're experiencing and what's led up to this and where it looks like things are going, and we want to analyze that together. So we'll start with some of the responses from people. So the first one is some just ghouls
Matt
over at
Dowd.
MSNBC, and,
who no longer has a job, I understand, for this comment.
And rightfully so. He had to fall on his sword. But here's MSNBC's hot take on Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, and it should be noted that this was like, in the moments after the shooting. Like, it had not even been announced that Charlie had succumbed to his injuries. There was still a lot of hope that he was still fighting as he was undergoing blood transfusion in the hospital and stuff like that. But this is what MSNBC, that no good rag in the States, had to have their take on it.
Talk to me about the environment in which a shooting like this happens.
Yeah, and again, emphasize what you just emphasized. We don't know any of the full details of this. We don't know if this was a supporter shooting their gun off in celebration, or so we have no idea.
Unbelievable. Come on, Matt. That's crazy. A supporter. It was a supporter who accidentally shot him
in the neck with one shot.
Following up what was just said, he's been one of the most divisive, especially divisive younger figures in this, who is constantly sort of pushing this sort of hate speech or sort of aimed at certain groups. And I always go back to hateful thoughts lead to hateful words, which then lead to hateful actions. And I think that's the environment we're in, that people just, you can't stop with these sort of awful thoughts you have and then saying these awful words and not expect awful actions to take place.
Matt.
And that's the unfortunate environment we're in.
So there you have it. Matt Dowd, MSNBC, blaming the victim of the shooting for his hateful thoughts and hateful rhetoric.
I have some thoughts on that might be different than most people think. I think that Matt Dowd had a little bit of a Caiaphas moment. Oh, sorry, the high priest Annas. He had an Annas moment where he's actually right. but not in the way that he thinks he is. So he's right that hateful thoughts lead to hateful speech, which lead to hateful actions. So he's right about that, but he's wrong that
About who's hateful.
thoughts and words came from Charlie Kirk. So he's absolutely right that hateful thoughts, evil, demonic, satanic thoughts in the minds of God haters look like calling people Nazis, look like blaming people for all sorts of evil, and then it leads to action. So he's right. It's a certain type of evil thought that led to very evil words, but it was the same source behind all of it that led also to the evil actions. So he's right, but in the wrong way.
Yeah, and the thing is, Matt Dowd wasn't alone in his trash takes. And, obviously there was plenty of things that we could play from media outlets, but our focus is here in Canada. So, Andrew, how do you think our mainstream media responded? And what better way to see that than actually going to our public broadcasting network that we pay billions and billions of taxpayer dollars for each year for this failing no good rag. I'm going to play a series of a few clips, and then we'll comment on it, Andrew, as we move forward. So basically, we're going to see how they frame the shooting, not unlike Matt Dowd, and the language that they use surrounding who Charlie Kirk is. And then we are going to finish with the expert that they bring on to the show. And it's a 3-minute clip, but you have to watch it because this is how the mainstream media in Canada is framing the issue. And you'll really, really notice something that's absent in all of these responses to the shooting of Charlie Kirk.
Still ahead, the latest on the killing of far-right activist Charlie Kirk in the U.S. Investigators have released images of a person of interest. We'll have more on that just ahead here on CBC News Network.
Far-right activist. There you go. Far-right extremist. One of the most influential political activists who got the sitting president elected by popular vote is a far-right extremist.
I mean, look, Charlie Kirk, and I don't say any of this to disparage him, but was a controversial, polarizing figure, right? The provocations, these university tours, he's going to these campuses, to sort of provocation and confrontation and debate and argument was a big part of what he did with his Turning Point USA.
Yes.
But he was very close to Donald Trump, who has ordered all U.S. flags to be lowered in honor of Charlie Kirk for his murder today. You can see right there. Is that the White House? I think that's the White House. So this speaks to his importance and central role to Donald Trump, Katie.
And we know he's connected to Donald Trump, who is a fascist and a Nazi, and the guy who's trying to.
I want to. The whole provocation thing also is they have to try to blame him in some way, because when Charlie Kirk sits down, he doesn't say anything. It's other people that initiate, and he responds. So this is what's wild, that their idea of provocation is saying, come ask me anything you want and have a discussion with me, and I'll talk about anything you want to talk about, which shows you that is actually something that many people in the country do not want, which is actually talking about things in a reasonable, calm manner. To them, that's provocation, right? Yeah. Allowing people to speak freely is provocation. That's where we're at.
And Andrew, it must be said, it must be highlighted again. He was going to university campuses. This is where he did most of his work. He wasn't even downtown in a city center. He's literally at the place.
With the sandwich board. He wasn't doing that.
Well, not that would obviously be wrong, but we're talking about this should be the most vanilla, unprovoking, like you couldn't be more down the middle with this. This is the place where these things happen and should happen. And like, you're right. He set up an open mic for people to come express their views and he always gave deference to those who disagreed with him. Right. In a group of 2,000 people, many of those who would be his followers, the people who disagreed got to speak with him first. Right. Because that's why he was there, to debate ideas in a civil. And the thing is, most of these commentators have never really watched Charlie Kirk. I guarantee you they haven't. And they haven't seen how he actually engages people. But that's the part that Charlie is so dangerous with, because he engages people so effectively from a biblical worldview as salt and light in a way that is still loving, though firm. And that is what is so disarming to so many of his interlocutors, and has converted so many of them.
And this, spoiler alert, and also to the Prince of Darkness.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's
this is spiritual warfare, and we'll get into that deeper. But so how is this being framed? He had it coming. He's divisive. He's provoking, supposedly unnecessarily. Right? That's what David's trying to put forward. Matt Dowd. He's full of hateful thoughts that come out of his hateful mouth that lead to hateful actions from other people, and he shouldn't be surprised because he's spewing hate speech, right? So he's a hateful person spewing hate speech. That's what we're dealing with. And look, this is CBC's take. In the light of the assassination, the martyrdom of a Christian man speaking boldly in public, this is CBC's take, and this is the expert that they have on the show. Unbelievable.
What concerns does that raise for you?
Okay, so what concerns does the assassination of Charlie Kirk raise for you? This is what we get from Barbara Perry.
And it is very disconcerting what we're seeing, especially from,
left-wing extremists, maybe trans ideologues, right? She's the center of hate and bias. She should probably understand it from all the perspective. What do you got to say, Barbara Perry?
Trump and his supporters as well, where they are calling him a martyr. There are some in online spaces that are calling for further violence, retaliatory.
Which we have to stop there. They're calling him a martyr. So I use that language. So what she's saying is it's inappropriate to call him a martyr.
Well, the reason why it's inappropriate to call him a martyr is because if he's a martyr, then that means there's an element of nobility that must be honored and virtue that must be exalted, but rather he must be made to be a bad guy so we don't have to do any of those things.
Yes.
And
exactly.
I've also, I don't know what deep dark corners of Reddit and 4chan she's been swimming in, but what she's calling calls to violence are what I've seen people saying that they demand justice, and the kind of justice they demand is biblical justice, not vigilante justice, which means the person who did this should be executed by the state. Yeah. And that's in her mind, that's calling for violence. Yeah, that's calling for violence. Capital punishment.
That violates their basic human right.
Yeah. These are the euphemisms, right? When she says people are calling for violence, there might be some weird super red pill nutzos that are actually calling for violence, but she doesn't follow them on social media. She doesn't swim in those waters. What she's perceiving as calling for violence are people saying, like I would say, that the person who committed this crime, if captured and found guilty, should be put to death. Yeah, that's
and just before we're moving on, Barbara Perry, this lady who you're going to hear, she is the expert, the founding director of the Center on Hate, Bias, and Extremism at Ontario Tech University. She's a professor there. She works with UNESCO, the UN, on counter hate. She is a part of the Canadian Board of Human Rights on hate on hate and extremism. She's probably bedfellows with the Anti-Hate Network, which targeted us, Andrew. Said we're hateful.
Which means
LCC
she
is hateful.
Which means that she's an exceedingly hateful person herself. Is it?
Yeah,
that's the point you're getting at.
She's a demon. But this is the expert in our nation. This is who our state broadcasters having on. This is the takeaway from Charlie Kirk's assassination. Yeah. Fear Trump and Kirk supporters. Unbelievable. Listen
violence. So I really fear that this will lead actually to an escalation, as you know, the left in particular is vilified in many of these narratives, and quite explicitly.
Is it vilifying to call people Nazis? And I mean, yeah.
And an ex-post comments by Trump from Trump yesterday, which really did put the blame fairly, soundly at the feet of the left and of liberals, and by extension Democrats as well.
I just pause you on that, because I was going to play an excerpt from that message. It was direct, to sort of a video message.
Spoiler alert:
in the
Trump
Oval Office.
Trump is not going to blame the left. He's going to explicitly blame the far left.
Calm
but
the waters, or
they
at
don't
least
care
to
about
speak
reality.
out in condolences. But then it really did swing very quickly back to political discourse. Let's listen to that, Barbara, so everyone knows what we're referring to, and then we'll talk about it further.
The president talked
past time for all Americans and the media to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree day after day, year after year, in the most hateful and despicable way possible. For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today.
This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible.
Yes.
This is what's given rise to some today, Barbara, saying they're concerned about payback or additional political violence. Again, what is your reaction and concern about what that presidential message may indeed incite?
Yeah, it really irks me, and it really does concern me, because it's very much in line with
it irks me because he said something true. Oh no!
The enemies. We've seen it from Trump in terms of job loss and investigations and mass arrests and deportations, that sort of thing. But there's also the hypocrisy there, I think, that feeds into the rhetoric, right? Where he's talking about the polarizing rhetoric and the vilification, which is very much, laid at his feet.
This is unbelievably rich. He was literally two people tried to assassinate him. How many people tried to assassinate Kamala Harris last election? 0, as far as we know. 2 public assassinations attempt on Donald Trump because of the rhetoric that calls him a Nazi all the time. And his most effective political activists and allies now shot in the neck. And it's Trump. It's Trump. And this gets to what Jordan Peterson's talked about. We live in such a left-wing echo chamber that's been, our entire society has been captured by leftist radicals and Marxists, that there is no left-wing extremism. The only extremism is that which is on the right, even in situations where lefties are shooting up Catholic schools because they're delusional demons, even if they're assassinating right-wing political activists. It's just unbelievable. This is a 3.5 minute segment
of exactly the language that we're seeing there. The language even that Charlie Kirk uses, vilifying particular groups, talking about the Democrats, for example, as, and I quote, standing for everything that God hates.
Pause for a sec. Pause.
That's true.
That's so again, That's correct. But here's the issue though. So again, that we need to understand what's happening behind the scenes. The issue is that, Charlie Kirk says that the Democrats stand for everything that God hates, which is true.
Sodomy, abortion on demand.
Right. So that's actually true. They do stand for all those things.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that when you, and we'll see this in a bit because I want to spend some time in John chapter 8, when people's actual motives and desires are exposed, they will lie and deflect, and because they understand, it actually makes me look bad, right? Like it actually is bad. I don't want everyone to know that I do support murder and all sorts of evil things. I actually don't want them to know that because because people don't even realize that they're made in God's image. They have a conscience,
Mm-hmm.
and that they actually do have this internal sense of right and wrong. So they want to suppress that. And so what they'll say is, "Oh, but that's not the case at all. We don't stand for everything that God hates. No one's trying to kill you." But we'll see. This is the response when you really expose just the darkest, most evil corner of their lives and ideology. Some people will own it. So we're going to see a clip of someone who does own it. Like, this is who I am, and they own it.
Mm-hmm.
But the people in power, the elites, the people who are much more, presentable and proper, they won't own it because there's too much at stake for them. So they want to say, like, this woman wants to say, yes, I stand for everything that God hates and is against God. But she knows that would be political career suicide. Mm-hmm. So out of self-preservation, she can't be honest about it. But she believes that. She knows that's true. Yeah. And she agrees with that. She does.
So it gets worse though, Andrew, because now, so she's going from having such a perverse take that in the wake of just mass amounts of left-wing violence on prominent conservative figures in the United States, that her concern is the backlash or the violence on the right. So the non-existence violence on the right is her concern, given an assassination of a right-wing political figure. So that's perverse. But it gets worse because then she starts just making up stuff about the guy who's just been assassinated,
claiming that queer people are defective and dangerous,
as though there are queer people,
and should be executed. I mean,
Charlie Kirk has never said that.
Now, Charlie Kirk might have said that the trans shooter that murdered people should be executed by the state, right? But he certainly did not say that queer people should be executed by nature or simply because they are quote unquote queer. Yeah. That's just a lie. That's a lie.
That's sort of polarizing language that contributes to this environment, this loss of civility, and encourages.
You know what else?
You know
what else is super polarizing? Saying that someone said that they think that queer people should be executed. That's actually really polarizing.
When they didn't say that, Barbara. You should lose all your positions everywhere, and we should salt the center of hate, and we should salt the anti-hate group. All these anti-hate groups are just Marxist activist groups who are pushing a left-wing agenda.
Yeah. Enemy, they're whatever the strike, and we are seeing this from both sides.
Sorry, total projection groups.
Concerns does.
Yeah. So that's just an amazing clip, Andrew, because it just shows you the cognitive dissonance. Her concern is her and her left-wing allies. Mm-hmm. the very same unhinged radicals who are fomenting the most hateful rhetoric, who are the most divisive political figures in Canada, who are literally on national TV making up things about a person who was just shot to death. Mm-hmm. Like, you can't get more divisive than that. yet they're the victims in the narrative. And Charlie Kirk is the no good, very bad predator in her mind. The very man who was assassinated for the crime of being a Christian who boldly debated in the public sphere. She is so delusional, it's unbelievable. And this is why it's beyond logic and rhetoric and reason right now. And this
but
is
I don't think she's I don't think she's
of it.
But I mean, I don't think she's delusional, right? I don't think she's delusional. I think that is a calculated move where she understands, one, I can't admit the truth and I can't be honest, so this is how I have to play it. Because if she were being honest, she would say, yeah, we hate God and everything he stands for, and everyone who agrees with him we also hate. So she does believe that, but she can't say it. So there's no delusion. Like she's not missing reality. She understands exactly what's going on, and she's intentionally crafting a narrative, not because she believes it to be true, but because she understands that's what needs to happen in order to maintain power and not reveal what's actually going on. She has to hide it.
Well, Barbara Perry and the CBC's really worried about hateful, divisive rhetoric from right-wingers who just get themselves killed for having conversations in public. It turns out that the internet is filled with people that upon seeing the gruesome shot go through Charlie Kirk's neck were celebrating with joyful glee at his assassination. There's I literally probably could have given you a 10-minute montage of people celebrating this, but I just want to highlight
these people. Let's be clear. These people, because there's a category difference. These people, these wild. The only difference between them and this Barbara lady is that they're being honest.
Yes,
that's the only difference.
100%.
They're actually there's no mask. There's no mask on. They're fully honest about it because they don't have anything to lose. Right? They don't have a position and a job. They don't have anything to lose, so they can be honest. But people with power and money and wealth and prestige and position, because they have so much to lose, they can't actually be honest, even though this is exactly how they feel as well.
So if you want to look at a bunch of vile people celebrating Charlie Kirk's death, feel free, go on the internet, go on X or Reddit or whatever. It's easy to find. But we want to highlight one because it actually came from a lady out of Canada, a social worker in British Columbia. And this is her take on Charlie Kirk's shooting.
It's very interesting to be so incredibly broken about one person dying and feel just kind of joyful about another person dying. I have zero empathy for anybody on the right side at all. Sorry. Not sorry at all. Bye, Charlie Kirk. Next. I'm not claiming to be tolerant. I'm very bloodlusty for people who have it coming. I have a lot. I mean, it just continues to build. There's a lot of this internalized just rage for so many things. So it would be great if they actually just kept doing this. Only can you televise it, please? Ooh, is it televised?
So there you go. It would be great, Andrew, if everybody on the so-called right wing, who we know is anywhere right of Karl Marx at this point, would be killed, would be assassinated and televised. So, well, there might be some people in the wake of the murder of Charlie Kirk who are saying justice must be speedily executed by God's lawfully ordained authorities, the state, and even maybe a public execution to deter this type of evil behavior. That's supposedly what's really firing Barbara Perry up.
Scary. Ooh, that hurts me.
Really, really scary.
Yeah.
Yet these type of videos from civil servants, social workers in Canada are going around. no empathy for people on the right, kill them and make it public so we can watch it. That's what they're innocent people. Not people who have murdered somebody in cold blood. Innocent people who have different political opinions to me. But CBC can only seem to find the expert who spends a 3-minute segment saying she's really worried about right-wing extremist violence after a right-wing influencer was shot dead. The only explanation is an explanation that we can come up with. But Andrew, I do want to highlight something because, okay, maybe Justin Trudeau, he's kind of ideologue. He's a left winger. He's a bad guy. We all know that. But now we have Mark Carney, right? And we were told Mark Carney is with it, man. He's a unifier. He's a unifier. He's pragmatic. He's a centrist. He's not an ideologue. So this is a moment we can unite, right? This is one thing that's easy for everybody to denounce. To come out right away upon hearing about it and say, we denounce any form of political violence, wherever it be. The old ACLU, I might not agree with what you're saying, but I die for the right to defend the right of you to say it. That old leftist trope, right? That's the sort of thing that we can expect from Mark Carney, right? Instantly coming out and condemning this sort of thing. No, that's not what we got. This is truly amazing. I do think this is truly amazing, and we have to highlight it. So if you look at the far right of your screen at the top, this is from the Pleb Reporter on Twitter. Mark Carney issues a statement on Charlie Kirk after Pierre Poilievre did.
6 hours.
6 hours.
6 hours after.
After. He was forced and pressured to make this, as the Pleb Reporter puts out. What a pathetic leader. This is the guy we have. This 6 hours. And I believe Pierre Poilievre put it out probably an hour or two after the events took place. Right? So we're talking like an entire work day after Charlie Kirk is shot in the neck. Mark Carney comes out and gives this pathetic statement. Unbelievable. And then we have a couple more tweets here from Canada and Kirk Lubimov talking about the presser that Carney did afterwards. And Mark Carney held a presser and had nothing to say about it. He did not mention it. He did not talk about it, which is in stark contrast to Pierre Poilievre on the day comes out and he talks about it. And then furthermore, he also has nothing to say, as Kirk Lubimov points out, on the recent just cold-blooded murder of Irina Zarutska, the Ukrainian refugee who was just killed riding a bus home in North Carolina by a repeat felon. Just killed. But he really is worried about, protecting Islamophobia and, jihadists, and he really wants a Palestinian state. This is the supposed centrist, the cool-headed banker that we were getting in Mark Carney. A guy who's, he doesn't have an ideological bone in his body. And Andrew,
I quickly, and we'll flesh this out a little bit later, but I actually disagree with the pleb. We got the right guy. Canada got the right guy.
The guy that we deserve.
We got not just the guy we deserve. No. As a nation, we got the guy we wanted. We got the guy we deserved. We got the guy we wanted. The right person, and by right I mean fitting, proper, and in line with God's purposes. We got exactly who we were supposed to get. Don't let any Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And the reason why they would say otherwise is either they're not thinking from a biblical perspective or with respect. I don't know I don't know if they're particularly biblically literate in these matters, but when we understand what the scriptures say and what Jesus has to say, which we're going to examine, no. Considering what we've done as a nation, we got exactly who we were supposed to get. It is the right man for Canada for right now.
Well, so Andrew, you know, I'm you can tell I'm fired up. I'm devastated. I'm heartbroken because this is the same, like this is Charlie's assassination, his martyrdom. It takes place just right after the Catholic school kids being gunned down by a radical trans activist in the radically far left Minneapolis, right? And we're, you know, Ezra, you know, who I work with, contracting out, doing video media stuff. We put out a video, literally, are Christians under attack? 2 weeks before one of the most prominent outspoken Christians is literally assassinated for debating on a college campus. And that wasn't even the first attack, right? We've seen multiple attacks on vulnerable Christian children, you know, Islamists across the world are violently persecuting Nigerian Christians. We're seeing the violence in our nation against churches and against Christians. It's ramping up all over the world. And it just breaks my heart too, Andrew, because it takes place all this is taking place in the same context where like the violent video of Charlie is on the same backdrop of this crazy news story that comes out of North Carolina, though, that I mentioned really quickly about Irina Zarutska.
We haven't even had time. There hasn't even been the time to properly process, consider, or deal with that. And then right away, here we are.
Exactly. And the video of that is just unbelievably horrifying. And in that case, here's some pictures of Irina, beautiful young lady. She was going home from her job at a pizzeria, and this psycho demon who I think had, you know, a rap sheet as long as, you know, your arm, you know, those are all his arrest photos at the bottom left of the screen there. He just randomly stabs her in the neck. And it's just horrifying images. She's just scrolling on her phone, totally unaware, totally innocent. And he just stabs her in the neck. And then he walks around the bus and he says, I got that white lady. I got that white lady. And nobody helps her. Nobody intervenes. Everybody moves away from her. And this takes place in the same context where Daniel Penny, who you had a violent, crazy, schizophrenic man like this murderous individual who killed this young lady, who was threatening to kill everybody on the bus or on the subway in a very similar manner. He protected everybody by choking out this man, and he died, you know, in the midst of that. And he was the one who was put on trial. You know, this is so hard to fathom, Andrew. It defies logic. It really does. And that's what we want to talk about, because we want to have the conversation where other people won't go, where few would tread, because they're worried about what it might seem like. But I think it's become harder and harder, Andrew, to deny the spiritual aspect of the warfare we're seeing. Mm-hmm. And deny that something truly demonic has been unleashed on the Western world, in Canada, in the United States. So let's talk about that. And I know you had things you wanted to say regarding John 8. And
well,
and
before I do
there's
one thing I want to say that I'm concerned. As soon as I saw the news that he was shot and that he died, I was one of my immediate concerns, and this is where that hate expert was maybe right, but in the wrong way, is I am concerned that there are members of a Nazi sympathetic, revisionist history, hyper red pilled kind of evil Christian nationalism that might take this as an opportunity to actually say and do some pretty devastating things. Mm-hmm. And I am there is a part of me that is concerned that people will look at this and say, you see, they're out to get us. We need to do something about it. And the something they're going to do is a kind of violence that's unjustified. So I am concerned for that. Obviously not as concerned as I am for the slaughter of people by many people who appear to all be of a similar political persuasion. But nevertheless, I want to give a little bit of airtime to the fact that I am concerned that this will be used as justification for even more kind of hateful rhetoric and activity from a group of people on the far actually pro-Nazi right that I disagree with greatly. So I think that's a concern. But I want to set this up. So John 7 and 8 give us the what's happening. But Matthew 12 frames the why it's happening. So in Matthew 12, Jesus heals several people, and he heals someone who is actually being oppressed by a demon. And Jesus performs the healing, and the religious leaders, the people of power, and the empty, dead people of faith essentially say that he does it by the power of Satan. And rather than say, oh, well, clearly this is God doing it, they're like, no, what he's doing is evil, and it's an evil reason why he's doing it. So this is why they accuse him of not doing good but doing evil. Now, I also want to say, I want to be clear, as I begin to unpack this, people might think, is he making a comparison between Jesus and Charlie Kirk? I'm not doing that, but I'm simply saying that the same kind of people influenced by the same spiritual reality that responded to Jesus a certain way are the same kind of people with the same kind of spiritual reality that respond to people who are united with Christ in a similar way. So I'm not doing a Charlie Kirk Jesus parallel, but it might sound like that as I unpack this, but that's not what I'm doing. So, but it's curious that in the same way that they would look at Charlie Kirk, who's doing good work, that's actually a blessing and benefit to people, and say, as they said to Christ, you're actually doing something evil. It's with evil intention, evil motive, and evil power behind it. And so Jesus criticizes them strongly for their sin and basically says, you are beyond the possibility of repentance so long as in your hard-heartedness you look at what God is doing and say it's bad, and look at what Satan is doing and say it's good. Which, again, you can see the parallels between a huge segment of the population that would look at good and say it's evil, and look at evil and say, haha, this is something to be honored, to be exalted. So Jesus will then say that the type of fruit you produce determines whether you're a good tree or a bad tree. Clearly, he's speaking against the religious leaders. And then the religious leaders say, okay, well, prove, show us a sign, prove that, you're saying some tough things against us. So we want to undercut your authority. So please say something, do something miraculous so that, you prove what you're saying. And Jesus refuses to. He calls them evil for demanding a sign because it's the wrong reason. So then Jesus says these words, is Matthew 12, starting verse 43. When an unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it passes through waterless places seeking rest, but finds none. Then it says, I will return to my house from which I came. And when it comes, it finds the house empty, swept, and put in order. Then it goes and brings with it 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they enter and dwell there, and the last state of that person is worse than the first, so also it will be with this evil generation. Now, I believe that in context, Jesus is speaking directly to them, and he's pointing to a reality that they are about to experience within a generation, which has everything to do with what happened in Israel internally leading up to and including the siege of Rome. And so I think that his indictment against them is, here I am, I have come doing this incredible work of God because I am God. And rather than respond well to me, who is ushered in God's kingdom with the coming of God's Messiah and with the eventual sending of God's Spirit, all the things that God promised in the Old Testament would be signs of his kingdom coming on this earth, rather than respond well and continue in faith, because you reject Christ, it's actually going to get worse for you. And it does get worse for Israel. It gets significantly worse for Israel in the 40 years leading up to the destruction of the temple. So I think there's a direct indictment. But I think the principle that we can extract from that more broadly is that when you have a person, a church, a nation, where there's an incredible work of God that happens in that nation, where you see the blessing of God, you see the fruit of his power at work, where people have an opportunity to respond to the goodness and grace of God through faithfulness and obedience and actually doing what's required so that they can safeguard against the evil return of the demons. When they don't do that, I think what you end up seeing is a worse situation than before. And I think that's precisely where we are as a nation. And I would say this regarding the United States as well. I think the spiritual reality that many people either don't see or don't want to acknowledge is that anywhere from 200 to 250 years ago, this continent was the recipient of tremendous grace and blessing. The gospel came here. It broke out in salvation and transformation. That nations were established as Christian nations built on biblical principles that yielded incredible fruit and blessing and kind of flourishing and prosperity for everyone. And at that moment, it was incumbent upon believers to keep the house in order and to do everything required of them so as to not see the return of seven demons. And I think what we've done instead in our country is this incredible work of God that's taken place. And then rather than do what's required of us to keep the house in order, the church more broadly in Canada has basically left the building. And I think what we're seeing now is we're seeing a kind of evil, a kind of demonic wickedness that can only be explained through the words of Christ, namely that the kind of demonic activity and reality is far worse than it's ever been. And the last state of the house, our present state of our house, our country, is much worse than the first. And that, I think, is where we are as a country. I think that God, who will not be mocked, who will bring the heavy hand of his discipline upon his people first before he brings his judgment upon a nation, for the sake of his glory and ultimately for the good of his people, has placed North America squarely under the pouring out of his wrath and judgment upon us. And he has given us exactly the kind of leaders that we deserve. And I said this off air, when Satan tries to interact with God and God says, consider my servant Job. So God basically hands over Job. And then God says to Satan, you can only go as far as I let you. And then Satan does what he can. And then Satan says, well, I haven't done everything yet. And God says, okay, I'll give you a little more leash. I believe that the kind of leash that God, in his wisdom and ultimately in his goodness and his mercy, the kind of leash that the Lord gave Satan is nothing compared to the kind of leash that he's given him in our country. I think that he had Satan on a much shorter leash with Job than he does with us. And I think that God has allowed Satan to bring tremendous havoc upon our nation.
Well,
because we deserve it, because we've earned it, and because we have our guilt, our sinfulness has warranted the seven demons coming back worse than they were at the beginning, and that is the only way that I can fully understand it. You can't say universities, public education, ideology, whatever. That's fine. Those are the symptoms. But I think the only way to actually understand what's going on and the utter lunacy of people in response to it is because Satan has been given tremendous leash.
Well,
country.
Andrew, I think what we have to understand, and I like that you use the word leash because that's literally the image that we get in Revelation 20. I think in the New Covenant era, the keys of the church, the exercise of church discipline, the work of the church in history, it is directly tied to the binding and loosing of Satan in history, right? When the church is its most faithful, Satan is the most bound. When we're about our work the way that we ought to be doing, Satan is constricted because he's ultimately been defeated through Christ. And as Christ's ambassadors, where we shine the light of the gospel, the darkness is dispelled. Where we are loose and free with our proclamation of the truth of Christ, Satan is bound. And if the work of the church, like you've made mention, is compromised, the loosing of Satan is a reality that comes out the back end. And that's why we are where we are. Because, this isn't even a problem we can put at the politicians' feet. It's not even a problem that we can ultimately put at, like you said, the secular school, the church.
And that's all the part of the problem. That's what I mean. That's a part.
We let this happen. We let this happen.
That's all a part of the problem. So the current state, our current political, we've said this countless times, our current political state is what it is because the church is disengaged. The current state of
two things. Actually, Andrew, let me jump in there really quick. Not only disengaged, the church apostatized, and instead of being the true church of the Lord Jesus Christ, we gave into a false gospel of the social gospel, and instead of being actual Christians, we were Marxists pretending to be Christians. In a lot of the work that was done in the 20th, in the late 19th, and throughout the 20th century. So we apostatized, and then the actual faithful church, we retreated, right? We retreated from the scene. We let the demons take over. We didn't have these fights when the true battle was raging, and judgment begins at the household of God, and the binding and loosing of Satan is dependent on the faithful work of the church in nations. And we are where we ultimately are, where Christians are being gunned down for being public advocates of a biblical worldview in all spheres of life in our nations because the church abandoned its role as the watchman on the wall.
So that's the framing. Okay, the framing is our house was in order. The gospel comes to North America. Canada is established as a Christian nation. The house is in order, and then the church in Canada decides to just fail at its role, and then the demons, the seven demons have come back, and that's what we're seeing.
And they're far worse than the first state, right? That's the point.
Even recently, we talked. I don't know if we mentioned this on the show, but the simple fact that according to the study done by Fertility and Sterility, that as many as for every one or two babies that are born through IVF, another 18 or so are killed, which puts the numbers of babies that have been slaughtered since 1971 to be 500 million, which is just absolutely bananas. So the house is in order. The demons have returned. We've not done our job. So, but what does that look like? Okay, so fine, Andrew. That's the framing. North America's worse now than it was because 7 demons have come. Our sinfulness and our evil have earned the just wrath of God. He is God in his wisdom and in his mercy, ultimately, for the good of his people and for the glory of his name, has given Satan a much longer leash than he has before. What does that look like? So this is where we get to John chapter 7 and chapter 8. So before you get to John 7, at least twice in John's gospel and multiple times in other gospels, the religious leaders seek to kill Jesus. They want to kill him. They want to silence him, ultimately because he's a threat to their power. He's a threat to their position. But there's a deeper spiritual reality going on. But at least on the surface, that's why they perceive him as a threat. So they want to kill him. So at the beginning of John 7, Jesus doesn't go to Judea right away because the Jews are seeking to kill him. So John's clear they want to kill him. So he eventually does go after the disciples go ahead of him, and he arrives and he's interacting with the religious leaders. And he says these words in John 7:18. The one who speaks on his own authority seeks his own glory, but the one who seeks the glory of him who sent him is true. In him there is no falsehood. So Jesus is comparing them, right? The religious leaders seek their own glory, and Jesus is seeking the glory of God the Father. Has not Moses given you the law? Yet none of you keeps the law. Why do you seek to kill me? And they do seek to kill him, right? So the truth is they want to kill him. So look at their response. The crowd answered, "You have a demon. Who's seeking to kill you?" That they're lying, right? They're trying to cover it up. They're trying to hide the truth. They do want to kill him, but they're covering that up. And the reason they're covering it up is because they're concerned for their own glory, and they can't be fully honest about what's going on. But they actually do want to kill him. So the interaction continues. We get down to John chapter 8. Jesus says that ultimately he is the only light that gives sight and understanding and spiritual life, and that people who persist in sin are slaves to sin. They must be set free by Christ. But then there's this interaction, John 6:36. If the Son sets you free, Jesus says, you'll be free indeed. I know that you're offspring of Abraham, so I know, Abraham is your biological father. Yet you seek to kill me because my word finds no place in you. I speak of what I've seen with my father, and you do what you've heard from your father. So there again, Jesus says, you are seeking to kill me, to end my life. Why? Because I do the business of my Father in heaven, and you do the business of your Father. So your Father's business means you're going to kill me. My Father's business means that I'm about setting people free and bringing light so that they will be saved. So this interaction ensues. Abraham's our father. And Jesus says, yeah, but if Abraham were really your father, you would do his works. Verse 40. But now you seek to kill me, a man who has told you the truth that I've heard from God. This is not what Abraham did. You're doing the works of your father. Okay, so again, there's a source of why they're doing what they're doing and why they want to kill him. At least this time they don't deny it. They don't say, well, we're not trying to kill you. They just kind of gloss over that. Jesus says, if God were your father, you would love me, for I came from God and I'm here. I came not of my own accord, but he sent me. So again, but this could apply to any believer and Charlie Kirk ultimately, that people who love God love those who are children of God, and people who hate God hate those who are children of God, whether it's the Lord himself or any believer. Why do you not understand what I say? Jesus asked. Because you cannot bear to hear my word. You're of your father, the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. And what are his desires, according to our Lord? He says of Satan, he was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character, for he is a liar and the father of lies. But because I tell you the truth, you do not believe me. Whoever is of God hears the words of God. The reason why you do not hear them is you are not of God. Then finally they say again, curiously enough, you have a demon, right? This is all evil, what you're saying, what you're doing. It's not good. It's very evil. And Jesus, I do not have a demon, but I honor my Father and you dishonor me. I do not seek my own glory. Okay, so he's not like them. So again, we know you have a demon. What, you're saying you're never going to die? Jesus says, if you keep my word, you'll never see death. Again, you definitely have a demon. Are you greater than Abraham? Are you greater than the prophets? Who makes you so great? And then Jesus says to them in verse 58, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. So everyone who denied that they were trying to kill him, now verse 59, they picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. Okay, so what's happening there in John chapter 7 and John chapter 8? What's happening is those who are not in Christ, those who have not been born again of God, who've not bowed the knee in submission to Christ, who are not children of God through faith and the filling of his Spirit, those people have a master, they have a father, they have someone who directs their lives, and that person is Satan. Okay, that person is Satan. Your next door neighbor, who is a kind, sweet, very hospitable non-believer, has a master. That master is Satan. We don't like to talk in these terms. Okay, this is an uncomfortable thing for a lot of churchgoers to have to deal with or even hear. But either Jesus is right or he's wrong. And so if the true and living God is your father and you are part of God's family, you've been born again of his Spirit, then that's who you are. If not, Satan is your master and Satan is your father. That's what Jesus says. So let's put these two together. We now have countries in North America where, one, the great work of God in the past has been disregarded. The church has fallen asleep and failed to do its job to stand as watchmen at the gate. The 7 demons have come back. Satan has a longer leash. He is wreaking havoc in a way that he's never done before. And in that setting, you also have a large swath of the population and pretty much everyone who occupies a position of elected office and really pulls all the levers of power in our countries. All of them are now slaves to Satan who do his bidding, and his bidding is lies and murder. That's his MO, lies and murder. This is why we have what we have. And this is why someone like Charlie Kirk, and I say this from the perspective of the satanic agenda and the leash that he's been given, this is why someone like Charlie Kirk had to die. He had to be snuffed out by them from their perspective because he was a threat to this. He was a threat to the death cult demonic agenda that is being pushed by both sides of the political spectrum, by both sides of people who are in political power. And he was having a tremendous effect in seeing people come to faith and having the message. I mean, the clip we're going to show that he's clear. I've been following Charlie Kirk for several years now. I found the last year he's been so much more overt about what he believes, about the necessity of faith, about the authority of the Bible, but he's just being so overt about his beliefs. And that is unacceptable for the demons who do the will of their father, who is Satan. And so that's why I don't think that this was a radical left-wing pro-trans person takes out Charlie Kirk. I think that this represents a man who could have been president, a man who would yield tremendous political power and also influence for good, promoting life. And in the same way that they took up stones to throw against Jesus, in the same way they plotted to kill him, the same way they killed the apostles, the same way they killed the prophets, Charlie Kirk had to die because he was a threat to the kingdom of darkness. And Satan, who's a murderer, had to take this action. I think that's what's going on.
Potentially, right? We don't know some of this stuff, but I think that's a good read regardless, right? We know that Charlie was bold in his faith. He was bold for speaking up, and he was mightily effective in everything that he did. And there is some crazy news coming out on X, like straight up to date that I was literally looking at while you were sharing about that stuff.
Before you do, I just want to say that I think the difference is up until about a year ago, Charlie Kirk was a force for, right-wing conservatism.
Yes.
So he was a force for conservatism, for the promotion of the Republican Party and Donald Trump, which again, the promotion of conservatism, political social conservatism, I agree with it. It's Christian conservatism. But that was Charlie Kirk, beyond a year ago or a year and a half ago. But the last year especially, he has not been, I don't even think primarily he has been a force for quote unquote political conservatism. I think he's been a force for the proclamation, the clear and bold proclamation of the gospel, and the shining of the light into all the dark places, exposing a satanic agenda.
Andrew,
and that seems to have increased in the last year.
On that note, some inside baseball. So Albert Mohler spoke with Charlie Kirk at an event very early on in Charlie's career. And he recalled that Charlie was summarily unimpressed with a Christian conservative leader because if you know anything about Charlie, he was very much a broad tent, like conservative, right? Like much of like what we're told is conservatism in Canada. And he didn't want to be too specifically Christian. He wanted to include more and more people. I think he was a coalition builder for sure, regardless. But you're right, that as he got deeper into his faith and it became more central and he actually got deeper into the political warfare, I think the myth of neutrality became more and more real and more evident. And then he realized there is a spiritual battle that you've been talking about that's at the heart of everything we see in politics. And that's what really changed things. So then they started doing TP USA Faith. Still very broad faith coalition, but I know personally there was efforts, especially this last year, to reach out to solid Christian men and get them as the leader. Like there was an active push within TPUSA Faith to solidify
Jeff Durbin had an event coming up soon that's been canceled or postponed. He was asked to be involved with it.
Yes, and I know other men that we know and love that had plans on meeting Charlie next month, literally next month, to talk about educating TPUSA people in a further biblical worldview. So this is the trajectory that you're talking about.
Yeah, and this is why I think he had to go. From the perspective of the demons.
Yes. And the demons hate Christ and they hate his servants, especially his effective, bold servants. You just think about Stephen, right? Stephen, the first Christian martyr, a deacon that was so boldly speaking that they could not refute in the public square. So they killed him. And to me, that's what Charlie represents. There was a level of hatred for Charlie because he was bold and he spoke in the way that he ought to. And he was a bold Christian, courageous man. And we want to, at this time, I put together this montage. I really want to share it with you all because I think it encapsulates who Charlie is as a person, and especially that deeper faith that he was pressing further on and deeper in to his faith as he continued to run the race. And I just want to share this now for you. I can hardly get through it, but we'll see.
We as Christians are called to fight evil. It's one of the lesser known scriptures, Psalm 97:10. For those of you that love God, you must hate evil. My call is to fight evil and to proclaim truth. That's it.
If everything completely goes away, how do you want to be remembered?
I mean, if I die?
Everything just goes away. How would you, if you could be associated with one thing, how would you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered for courage for my faith. That would be the most important thing.
And indeed he is. That will be how people remember Charlie. And my prayer, Andrew, is that many more Charlie Kirks across the United States, across Canada, especially pastors. I really think, well, if the church led us into this mess, it's got to be men of God to lead us out. May we pick up Charlie's mantle. Right? May we pick up Charlie's mantle and press forward. Again, not to compare Charlie to Christ or anything, but I think the general principle of the fact that a seed that does not go into the ground and die remains on its own. But one that goes into the ground and dies will reap a great harvest. And obviously that's ultimately a picture of Christ. But those following in his footsteps, I pray we would see Charlie and we would be inspired by who he was and how he gave his life for Christ. And we would act in the same boldness, in the same courage, that we would pick up that mantle, not for Charlie, but for Christ. And that's the way that Charlie would want it. And that's why, we've, tried to do what we do here on the program. We're trying to set a tone, to speak boldly in the public square, that Christians might be emboldened to speak up in the public square, to teach people how to interact with news and politics from a biblical perspective, that they might be able to speak boldly in these areas and that they might be themselves inspired to get active. Now, we're not Charlie Kirk. We're not organizers at his level. I don't have the endless energy he does. But that's our prayer. And that's why we've been going forward doing this show. Regardless of how big the audience is, regardless of how many views, it's something that needs to happen and needs to be done. And I just pray that we will not let Charlie's death be in vain. That we will press forward with all boldness, because the times for apathy, the times for sitting on the sidelines, they're gone. Everybody, it's time to get involved, and it's way past time.
My encouragement for people would be, now is the temptation is, do you see what happens when you speak up? Right? Look at what happens when you take a risk. So the temptation is some form of disengagement, and that's precisely what got us into this mess.
Yeah.
So the only way forward is not to, you can't take a light and hide it under a basket. Right? You can't, you don't do that.
Yeah.
Because if you do that, all you're doing is you're allowing the darkness to remain. But when you take that light and you shine it for all to see, then others are drawn to it, and it gives light even to the whole city, right? So we, even though the temptation would be now to hide and disengage and seek the safety of silence and anonymity, the truth is that the only way forward is to continue to shine the light of Christ and proclaim what is true, even though it comes at a cost and even though there's a risk, because that's the only way out of this. The only way out of this mess is to actually obey Christ faithfully.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, I appreciate your comments, appreciate your thoughts. I do want to actually read the part of scripture that I was alluding to by way of close. And then I think I think it would be fitting to again end with the montage of Charlie and let him have the last word for today. So John 12:24. Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone, but if it dies, it bears much fruit. Whoever loves his life loses it, and whoever hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. If anyone serves me, he must follow me, and where I am, there my servant will be also. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him. Brothers and sisters, let's pick up our cross and follow after Christ and do it gladly, just as Charlie did. Let's end again with Charlie's words in a moment of silence.
We as Christians are called to fight evil. It's one of the lesser known scriptures, Psalm 97:10. For those of you that love God, you must hate evil. My call is to fight evil and to proclaim truth. That's it.
If everything completely goes away, how do you want to be remembered?
I mean, if I die?
Everything just goes away. How would you, if you could be associated with one thing, how would you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered for courage for my faith. That would be the most important thing.